This training does not include any guidance on business processes or policies or regulations that govern your particular district way of doing things. What we'll try to do is to keep things general so that you can utilize RMS to fit your district's needs. Obviously, visual learners, audio learners, as mentioned, we do have some resources that are available. And I'll go ahead and bring those up right now. So first off, if you want, you can also direct your particular users to the RMS website, rms.usa.army.mil, and on that website, there's different resources available for them. They can go to the RMS documentation site as well. And on the RMS documentation site, they'll be able to download the manuals and download information for the contractor. And also for this particular virtual training, you'll be able to download the training slides as well. And as mentioned already, there are also the YouTube videos, the YouTube channel that we have. You guys can go ahead and go to the YouTube channel or direct your particular users to the YouTube channel so that they can get additional information. All right, so the question is, who is the district admin and who's this particular training for? This particular training is, of course, designed for district administrators, those who have been assigned at the district level for managing the official duties in some sphere in an admin capacity. So if you've been assigned permissions and roles of a district admin, then this is definitely for you. The benefits for this particular training is that we'll try to sharpen your skill sets so that if a user comes to you and asks a particular type of question directed at one of the modules that we will bring up in this particular training, you'll be able to address their concerns or be able to direct them to where they need to go. There are no prerequisites for this particular course. However, we do expect the attendees should be familiar with navigating RMS, entering data, and knowledge of your governing regulations for your particular district. Attendees should also expect to gain a deeper understanding of how RMS works, why RMS works the way it does, and gain insight on how to teach their fellow RMS users. So that's the overall scope and goal of this particular Train the Trainer training. The topics that we will be going over, we've identified about 13 different topics where users most often have questions on interactions, and those are setting up the prime contractors and subcontractors in the district office and also in the contract specifically, the additional SAM change to replace DUNS and UEI, the adding staff and defining staff roles, the assigned PII access for RMS users, PCF documentation, document package exports, how to filter selection views on certain modules, how to set up contracts, the SDEF import, the RMS P2 interface, schedules, more importantly, going over activity, milestone, placement, and feature schedule, and then creating custom reports and queries using the new Telerik integrated custom report designer that we have just recently placed inside of RMS. And then the last is going to be the closeout tab. So those are the 13 different topics that we're going to go over. We'll probably hit about half of those particular topics today, depending on how many questions that we have, and then hit the final half tomorrow to make sure that we leave time for any questions or any type of additional information that you may have as well. The first topic that we're going to slide into is we're going to talk primarily about setting up the prime contractor. And there's a couple of different areas that you will go to first. The first area that you normally go to is the district office area. And the district office is where you will navigate to add that prime contractor to the overall contract list. Once the contractor is added, the prime contractor is added to that list, then you'll be able to navigate to the actual prime contractor tab in the contract view. Once you've selected the prime contractor module, you'll be brought to this particular screen. And typically the contractor will populate the fields starting from the second section throughout the rest of the overall section. That's the home office, site office, staff information, and so forth. One one thing that you need to be aware of is that the contractor cannot add information to the top section. That's primarily for government entry. So contractor will add all the remaining information. The responsibility code for the prime contractor is always going to be prime, PRIM. So that's what will be entered for that particular prime contractor. Subcontractors will receive a 4-digit code for your particular selection level. Overall, there's 2 main buttons that usually come up to be a question. The first one is prevent contractor mode access. This option is utilized to prevent contractor from accessing contractor mode for this contract. And this is used when there is a particular dispute or termination or some other reason to prevent access to the contract by the contractor. So if you are in the middle of a particular modification or something is changing and you don't want the contractor to touch this area, that is what that particular button is for. Usually when I get questions, it's trying to ascertain, well, when do I press that particular button? And that's when you do it. The government will enter the prime contractor's NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System, if available. So if the contractor has a NAICS code, you'll enter it in the NAICS code section. And the DUNS code on the government side, as you can see, is a view only. The NAICS code for construction can be found at the following link. It's going to be naics.com. All right, let me switch over real quick. I just want to bring up one view here. RMS program here, and we're going to go ahead and click on the district office, and right down here is the prime contractors list. And so this is where you normally go in and enter the prime contractor initially if the prime contractor is not entered. So you click add, you'd enter the prime contractor name, and once the test contractor name is entered, he'll be assigned a prime contractor ID, and then you'll be able to add a UEI number. We'll discuss this a little bit later, and then the next code, cage code. The DUNS is read only. For any new contractor that you're entering from this point forward, a UEI number will be required. The DUNS is pretty much for historical purposes now for contractors that already had a DUNS entered. You'll then fill out the short name and then the full name. And then we have the home office information for street address, contractor staff, and then the contracts that they're assigned to. We'll get into this a little bit later, but I just want to make sure to bring that up really quickly before we get too far ahead. All right, the prime contractor staff is mentioned here. This is where the government will enter the prime contractor's first user as an admin. After that, the contractor is then responsible for adding more staff for those particular users. So when they go in here and they enter that particular contractor and they add a particular user, if they're adding a contractor that has already logged into the system, that particular contractor is added, and this is where you'd be able to make that contractor a user admin. Usually you'll want to make one contractor an admin, and then that contractor will then manage the rest of his particular staff. That contractor is now entered, and now that contractor will have contracts that he will need to manage that you assign to him. All right, we'll go ahead and cancel that. Now, it is recommended that contractors set up user roles to assign to non-admin users. So just, we try to make sure that they don't blanketly go through and assign admin to all of those particular users. They can do that if they want to, but in general, we want to make sure that those particular users don't do that. Any staff assigned to the prime contractor will have access to the contracts that the prime contractor is assigned. If they are administrators or given the user role, it is usually the job of the USA's representative to assign only the first contractor staff and make them an administrator. From that point forward, as I mentioned, the contractor will add additional staff to the prime contractor staff and assign user roles. It is easy for the contractors to make every staff an administrator, but as I mentioned before, this is kind of dangerous, as an administrator can add and remove additional staff and modify all contracts that the prime contractor has access to. So to avoid this, you should advise your contractor to set up user roles, to limit access, and allow greater control of the data. So if the prime contractor you're looking for does not show in the list of the prime, then you basically go in and add them the way I showed you before. You'll notice that there's no save button as well. This often confuses users. So the back button functions as the save button. Just click on the back button and your data will be automatically saved. So after adding the prime contractor staff information in RMS, click the back button and it saves your particular changes. Now, this is going through and walking you through the demo that I just gave a little bit ago, just to make sure that we have some consistency and applicability to the actual training here. So UEI, NAICS code, you'll enter the full name of the contractor. Obviously, DUNS number is read only. You cannot enter that any longer. You'll have to enter the UEI number. All right. Once you're done with the prime contractor, then you'll start to enter the subcontractors. Now, the subcontractors themselves is where the prime contractor can maintain a list of the subcontractors for those on the job site and track their performance and compliance in this particular module. The subcontractors module is linked to various other modules in RMS 3, such as daily reports and pay activities. One of the key things to keep in mind is that subcontractor module, since it's linked to other modules, if you're trying to delete a particular subcontractor, if that subcontractor is linked to another module, you will not be allowed to delete that subcontractor. So one of the other things that you can do as well as subcontractor responsibility codes can be imported into RMS 3 via Primavera or any SDEF or any SDEF compliant program or network analysis program that they have by going to the Import Export tab and choosing NAS SDEF module, or they can be manually entered from the subcontractors module itself. If imported from Primavera, users can proceed to the subcontractor screen to fill in the full name, amount subcontracted for the first tier subs, and other pertinent information regarding that. When you usually come to the screen, you'll usually click on the add button. Once you click on the add button, it'll prompt you for the 4-digit code, and then you can go ahead and click the add button into that 4-digit alphanumeric code, that unique code that you have. If you don't have a particular code, you can actually make one up for the contractor. It just needs to follow that particular subcontractor for the life of this particular job. If the contractor is not using a schedule package, then that's where the arbitrary code comes in to map to that particular subcontractor. The contractor short name entered on the abbreviated name for the subcontractor should be used in the reports with limited space. So we're just going to go ahead and touch really briefly on some of these particular fields. Some of them do come up quite often when we're dealing with some support issues that may arise. The contractor short name field is only limited to 20 characters. The contractor full name, you can enter the subcontractor's full name here. This field is only limited to 60 characters. The address, you can enter the subcontractor's mailing address there. The trade, you click on the box and select the subcontractor's trade from the displayed lookup. If the applicable trade cannot be found in the table can be updated for the district library. So for that, let me go ahead and jump back over here and let me pull up RMS real quickly. And so when you get down to the trade, sometimes they might go to the trade and they're trying to look up a trade. If the trade doesn't exist, then they can go to the district library, and there's a list here called contractor trades. When they click on contractor trades, they can go ahead and add a new contractor trade to the list so that it will display in that lookup. So that's usually one of the issues that may arise, one of the gotchas. They might be looking for a trade that doesn't exist. You can go ahead and add that trade custom. After the library is updated, you'll be able to select that particular trade from the updated list The controlled unclassified information, POC, office phone, and office fax, you can enter the subcontractor's point of contact information in these particular fields. The subcontractor amount, you'll just enter the full amount assigned, allowed of the subcontractor. This is required by the Prompt Payment Act and is used in the progress payment request. The contractor is a small business, check this box if applicable. If insurance is required, you'll check this box to track insurance validity dates. The payroll required, you'll check this box to track submitted payrolls. If the payroll's ending day of the week, you'll check and select the day of the week, marking the end of the subcontractor's typical payroll work week. And if the subcontractor, or if the contractor is a second tier sub, so if he's managing a subcontractor on his own, then you'll check this box if applicable for that as well. Now, when you're deleting a subcontractor, it's pretty simple. You just select the subcontractor and delete that particular subcontractor itself. However, as I mentioned prior, if you're trying to delete that particular subcontractor and that subcontractor is linked to other modules, the record will not be deleted. So you'll have to delete those references before that subcontractor can be deleted. If the payroll's ending day of the week is changed mid-contract, then duplicate payrolls could be generated. This is kind of a gotcha here, so we just want to make sure that we are not going in and changing the payroll's ending day of the week. It's recommended that once the contract starts, this field does not change. So if this particular issue comes up with a user, you should know how to address this now. Reminder, really quickly, payroll ending date must be set. So if you have a payroll ending date, you need to go ahead and set that as well. Let me go ahead and switch back over to RMS. All right, and within the RMS program, when we navigate to a particular contract, we'll come in here and we have our prime contractor. It's going to be underneath the administration. We have our prime contractor and our subcontractors listed here. Our prime contractor, if we select that, if we select that, we'll be brought to our prime contractor screen. These are the fields that the government can enter. So these fields here down to payee office, and then the rest of the fields are where the contractor will be entering their particular data. We can also view the contractor staff that is assigned to this particular contract as well. All the contractor staff members that were added after you added the administrator will list here as well, so you can view them also to make sure that you gain a proper understanding of who's all viewing that particular contract. The subcontractors module, which is right here as well, we can come in here, we can create our arbitrary code and then assign our subcontractor. And then we can go through and start to enter the information for our subcontractor here with all the pertinent information for that particular subcontractor. All right, and that reaches the end of our first module. Let me go ahead and unmute to see if we have any questions that are available. And we'll go through and try to answer any questions that you guys may have. All right, you guys can unmute yourselves now if there are any questions.
Yeah, hello, CLM. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, excellent morning from here. Well, I was just if I have a question offline, is there any way I can reach you and just for clarification? Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I was going to say you can contact the RMS help desk and we walk you through any type of issues that you may have.
Okay. We can do that then.
Yep.
So I don't waste so much time and everything. But so far, so good. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
Welcome,
Over.
sir.
Okay. All right. No questions. We'll go ahead and move on. All right. Our next section is the GSA SAM change to replace DUNS with UEI. And so this is pretty much legal. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the read the slide. On this one, on April 4th, 2022, GSA was transitioned away from the DUNS number and began using the unique entity identifier for purposes of registering in SAM.gov. The UEI is owned by the federal government and is generated in SAM.gov. So some government contractors will still require a company to have a DUNS number, which you may already have. If not, you can apply for a free DUNS number. The DUNS number is globally recognized and utilized for contract checks, compliance checks, business credit and funding, and other business use cases with 90% of the Fortune 500 companies. In most cases, it will be helpful to register your business UEI, your business's UEI, and for the business to have a DUNS number. Request one for free if your business does not already have one. To register for a unique identifier for some government contracts, UEI, visit sam.gov, and to request your free DUNS number, visit get DUNS number. All right, so let me go ahead and pull those up. So if you're going to go ahead and get a DUNS number, this is where you'll be going to get the DUNS number. It's going to be dnb.com/duns-number/get-a-duns.html, and it'll bring you to this page, and then the user can then go ahead and request their DUNS number from there. You can also get this link from off of the slides, so you can download the slides, and this link is available on the slides as well. The other location is the sam.gov, and that's right here. So when you go to sam.gov, you'll be presented with this page. It'll give you all the information pertinent for the unique entity ID, SAM registration. So you'll be able to get that information from here as well. All right, so between those two pages, you should be able to get all the information that is required for the DUNS and for SAM and for the UEI. All right, for additional information on the change in UEI, visit this page. That's sam.gov. That was the page I just showed. And that's sam.gov/content/DUNS-UEI. So I'm trying to make sure that I say everything just in case someone wants to listen to the actual recording more like as a podcast feel instead of watching the video. All right, so what changed in RMS? The DUNS number was not removed, but it is view only. If the contractor organization is currently registered in sam.gov with either an active or inactive registration, they have already been assigned a UEI. So the UEI must be entered. The UEI is viewable on the contractor's entity registration record in sam.gov, as mentioned previously. To learn how to view the UEI, see the guide, and that was the guide that I just popped up, so you can refer to the previous slide. If you have any other questions about UEIs or the recent UEI transition that are not answered in the facts or in the other resources available at fsd.gov, you can contact directly fsd.gov. That's basically what you tell your particular user to tell their contractor, or by choosing create an incident, and then they can go through and troubleshoot the incident, engaging them in a live chat. UEI is updated immediately after data is entered within RMS, but the user must log out and log back in to see the changes once they have their UEI information entered. The note to try to find UEI, basically, if you're starting from the login page, you'll go through and log in. You'll go to the map view and you'll select your district, and then you'll go to the district office, and from the district office, you'll select the prime contractor. Note, only those with district administration privileges, permissions can basically get this far. And then you'll be able to see on the screen in the view, in the data grid view, every active contractor listed as a prime contractor will have to add the UEI number. You can highlight and edit that particular user as well. The next question that usually comes up is, where do you actually find the UEI? And the UEI can be found at this particular site here. And that's the PDF for the UEI. So that's www.ed.gov/about/offices/list/OFO/docs/unique-entity-identifier-transition-fact-sheet. .pdf. And so with this PDF, you can go through, it'll navigate and show you all the pertinent information regarding the UEI fact sheet that you need to go through and read and become familiar with. And this is pretty much what you give your particular user if they're dealing with their contractor as district admins. All right, with that, when we navigate over to the prime contractor information area, there's a new field at the top. That new field is the UEI number field, and that requires manual entry. So essentially, you'll have to input the data manually. You can verify in RMS that the prime contractor has a UEI number and a read-only DUNS number. If they don't have a read-only DUNS number, that means that they were entered this year. So obviously, starting 2022, after April 2022, all contractors will be utilizing a UEI number and no DUNS will be entered. The DUNS still shows for historical purposes for any of the contracts that were entered pre-April 2022. Now, while the prime contractor UEI has been updated, the individual contracts themselves will need to be updated as needed, and you'll need to log into each particular contract and apply that particular update individually for each one of the contracts and each one of the primes for that contract. Essentially, it's the same steps that we mentioned previously. You'll go to the administration module. You'll click on the prime contractor view to update the individual contract. You'll then be presented with this particular screen, the two buttons that were indicated: prevent contractor mode access, and then the copy UEI and contractor information. That will allow you to select a particular contractor from a list. And then once you find the contractor that you want and you select that contractor's information will then be applied to the contract prime that's assigned to the contract. And in RMS from here, as usual, you'll come over to administration. You'll go to prime contractor, and on the prime contractor, that's just basically telling me I don't have any admin staff. I didn't add any admin staff for that. So essentially, you'll come right here, copy UEI and contractor information. Once you click on that, you'll be able to select a particular contractor. And then once you select that contractor and click OK, it'll apply that particular contractor's UEI to the backend data. All right, and with that, we are done with that particular module as well. We'll now open up the floor for any questions. Let me go ahead and unmute everyone. Okay, everyone's unmuted. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can drop them into the chat. I see people have been dropping questions in, and everyone's been getting them answered. All right, okay, so no questions for this section. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next section. All right, the next section is contract personnel. And this section is referring to adding staff and defining staff roles for the contract. Typically, the district admin adds, edits, and deletes contract user roles in RMS. So if you are the district admin, then you have specific roles to be able to add, edit, and delete a contract user role. The district admins have contract user role read write permissions for all contracts in the district. So if the office admins have read write permissions for all contracts attached to their office, but they have no access for contracts at other offices, district admins typically adds, edits, and removes project delivery team members to and from each contract and assigns them a user role. Any user with assigned user roles office permission can assign the office it's given in, and any user can be given district-wide permission with assigned user roles district or contract user roles permission. Now, you can check with your district to see if you have any questions about this particular process. Now, as I mentioned before, we do have a video which is outlined here that you guys can go ahead and take a look at. All right, so in RMS, when we click on administration, we can go ahead and click on contract personnel, and the contract personnel for the project delivery team would be entered here. where we can enter those as well. All right, so for logging in to the contract personnel and for the project delivery team, you can assign user roles inside of the contract. That was the screen that I just visited. The contract personnel contains 2 data grids. The first data grid is the project delivery team members. You can add government staff members to contracts and assign user roles to whom will be executing the contract. Now, the contract personnel user roles can view user roles from users set up in RMS 3 government mode. Now, usually when you're going through and setting up and adding project delivery team members, you'll click on the add button. You'll use the search function to locate the staff member to add as a PDT person. Then click on the staff member's name. You'll click OK. Change staff member's position title to reflect their role on the contract. For instance, a PE could have a role set as a QA. Click the back button to save and commit the changes. And then the new member will be displayed on the project delivery team members. Now, the thing I usually get asked on this, and I don't know why I usually get asked, but I'll usually get asked the question, who do I add to the project delivery team? I couldn't tell you, I don't know. The delivery teams typically include those professionals included in the programming, planning, design, and construction of the project. So the size and composition of the project team will vary depending on the extent of the capital and design that the construction budget has and various facets of the project. So essentially, if you go to the project owner or who's in charge of the overall project, they should be able to give you some direction on who to add to the project delivery team. I can go ahead and stop right here, and if Bosley wants to jump in or to add some additional insight, that'll be great. Over.
Yeah, I think you covered it very well. There isn't much more to add.
Sorry, I was slightly split. I also agree. I was trying to unmute myself, so.
All right, copy that. I just want to make sure I wasn't misleading anyone. The contract personnel edit a PDT member, basically the same exact steps. You'll click on a PDT member, click on the edit button, change the position, title, or staff member, click the back button to save and commit the changes for that particular user. And then the last option that we will take a look at is the deletion. Essentially, you'll go in, you'll find the PDT member, you'll click on delete, the delete confirmation will pop up and will be displayed. You'll review the staff member, position, title to be deleted, click on yes to delete that particular person, and then click on the back button to save and commit the changes. All right, so for that, let me go ahead and jump into RMS here. So as mentioned before, that's the project delivery team. If we're clicking in project delivery team, and I go ahead and add myself as a project delivery team member, I can go ahead and add my title. You just go ahead and select the title. And then from there, you have your member that's added. And if you want to go ahead and edit that particular member, you can go back in, edit that member, change the title, something else. And then when you're ready to delete, you can go through and delete. And that's the pop-up that comes up, delete this item, yes. And then the project delivery team member is deleted. So usually the main question, the only question I usually get asked with project delivery team is who do I add? And I think usually you got to reference to your project owner or whoever's in charge of the project to get that information scoped down for you. All right, and we've reached the end of that particular section as well. Any questions? I'm going to go ahead and unmute for everyone. All right, I'm unmuted. If anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and jump in. Over. All right, copy that. No.
Hey, Gerald, we have one question in the panel. What is the purpose of the contract personnel user roles section showing inactive persons?
Usually you probably might not want to delete that particular person because that person might be assigned to something. So you want to make that person inactive so that you can still know who was assigned to a particular item. And so that's what the inactive is for. Okay, I'm looking, I didn't see that question. Let me scroll down a little. How do we obtain the slides? Okay, I see. I finally refreshed and I got the question. All right, you obtain the slides by just going to the RMS website. So you can go to rms.usa.army.mil, and the slides are right on the home page. And you can basically go to CONUS Day 1. The slides for the Trade and the Trainer are right there. You can just click on it and download it. So right on that main page. All right, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is it's 11 or my time, Pacific time is 11:43. So we've been going for about 45 minutes. Did you guys want to take a break or did we want to keep going? Keep going. I'll keep going forward. All right, so the next section that we're coming to is the PII access for RMS users. And so the PII access for RMS users need to have appropriate PII training, and they must be maintained to be granted access to RMS 3 PII modules. If the government user has a CAC, Common Access Card, PII training is maintained through the yearly UPass required training. So essentially, if you log into UPass, you'll see that your PII training is either current or not current, and then you'll get that expiration date. And some of you get the emails that lets you know, hey, your PII is expiring. If the government user does not have a CAC, the user will need to contact their PII district administrator with their UPass expiration date and RMS staff to access contractor payrolls, labor interviews, contractor file, labor folder and payrolls, and PII documents in exported contract files. So access to these modules has been limited to users who have completed the UPass PII training. Users that log into RMS using a CAC will have access to these three modules: the contract file, contractor payrolls, and labor interviews. However, RMS 3 government mode, controlled unclassified information users who log in with a username and password must submit PII training certification proof to the PII admin for users in the district to obtain access to this module. So if they're a user in the district and they need access to that particular module, they have to submit their PII training to the PII admin. To get access to PII and RMS, please contact the PII district admin for the district. There is a list of all district PII admins on SharePoint, so you guys can go ahead and take a look at that, which is only accessible from a government computer. Unfortunately, since I'm on my CFE, I can't pull that up, so I can't show that to you. But we can contact the PMO, we can get that list, and then you can grab that as well. A link to this list can also be provided from the RMS Support Center, so please open a ticket entitled List for PII District Admins to obtain that particular list. So if you need that list, you can also open up a ticket as mentioned, and then we'll go ahead and send you that particular list. The support staff will send you that list. Now, the role of the PII administrator is to make sure that yearly PII training is properly maintained. The only way to become a PII administrator is to get approval from the RMS PMO. So the administrator will validate the documentation requested from the user and enter the expiration date into RMS in the PII training expiration date box. So one thing to note here is that PII expiration dates will only show for government users where the enable non-CAC login. So if that has been enabled, that's where it's going to show. So you can see that pictured above is the view of a user staff record showing the PII expiration date. If the user is set for a non-CAC login, enter the date by either typing in the date or picking it using the calendar icon to the right of the date box. So let's laser pointer. So right here is where you're going to be picking that date training. And then basically if you're assigning a district admin, PII admin rights, that's down here as well. So right there. So the message received when your PII training is expired or has not been taken in order for the user to continue to have access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls, the user will need to retake the PII training and provide it to the user's district PII admin before the expiration date. So if the user does not do this, access to those modules will be revoked. So that's one thing that you got to pay attention to, is that access to those modules will be revoked. And that's one of the main questions that comes up. They'll say, hey, I was able to get in yesterday, but now I can't get in today. And usually the reason why is because their PII admin was revoked. So if we go back, actually I can go back here, and we're top here, RMS staff. And from RMS staff, I can go and search for and right here is the PII admin, and then date PII training expires. Now for me, I'm an admin. All my stuff is set up for testing, so this is where you'd enter that particular date here as well. But for the most part, if you're logging in with a CAC, this doesn't need to be entered. If you're logging in with the username, password, non-CAC, then this is where that would be entered. All right, non-CAC users who need access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls will get notifications for PII training expiration dates when the expiration date is 30 days, 15 days, 7 days, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 day prior to the expiration date, and again once the date has actually passed. So I mean, we do our best to try to hit it hard to let them know that their stuff is expiring. So in order for the user to continue to have access to the labor interviews or contractor payrolls, the user will need to retake the PII training and provide it to the user's district PII admin before the expiration date. So I think the only big thing regarding this particular module for PII is usually if a user would go in one day and they're not able to go in the next day, that's one of the big issues, but they'll usually get a warning there as well. All right, and we reached the section regarding questions, so let me go ahead and unmute. All right, everyone's unmuted. And let me go through and take a look at the questions. All right. Okay, so we've allocated all this time for questions, but no one's asking any questions, so we're gonna blow through our time. We'll see. All right, let me go ahead and move on to the next section. All right, so the next section is PCF Documents, paperless contract files. So in this particular section, the paperless contract files or PCF is a secure web-based application. PCF is designed and certified to store official contract files as required per FAR subpart 4.8 in an electronic centralized depository. And I actually double checked this too. It is depository, so that's not wrong. As a web-based records management application, RMA, it is not approved for classified information. So this is very important. If you're uploading documents into RMS, we need to make sure that those documents are not classified documents. So failure to adhere to this policy is grounds for dismissal in accordance with U.S. Code Title 18-1001. So it's very important that we let the users know that, and then they pass that on to the contractors as well. So no classified information can be uploaded within RMS. Now, the way the RMS PCF data flow works is that RMS has a one-way data flow and allows documents that are generated in RMS, so the documents that are generated in RMS over here, to be sent over here to PCF. PCF is the required repository for all official contract documents. Contract file documents are automatically placed in the appropriate PCF folder, and those folders are often referred to as cabinets on the PCF side. Additional documents can be manually added if needed as well. The contract file module keeps track of the status of documents that are prepared or sent to PCF. All documents must be approved, accepted by the government before sending to PCF. So if your particular document is input and it's not completed and sent, it must be completed before you can actually send it. The contract file module is part of the administration module. So you guys can go ahead and click on the administration and then select contract file for the overall navigation. All the official documents are stored and uploaded to PCF from this section. You must manually add folders and subfolders after the award. Government signed documents will automatically upload to the correct contract file folder. Contractor signed documents for some modules will have to be manually loaded to the contract file folder. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with this particular area. The contract file as a whole stores all those official documents and then sends them to PCF. So for ease of use, the view is automatically grouped by the PCF folder and subfolder. Now, one note that you got to keep in mind is that you can also group by status or document title. So if users are trying to figure out how to group by status or document title, they can group by that as well. To expand one of the group folders, click on the lookup to the left of the folder name. To expand or collapse all of the folders, click on expand or collapse. Now, one thing to note as well is that documents deleted from the contract file will also be deleted from the originating document package and vice versa. So documents that have been sent to PCF or ready to send cannot be edited or deleted. So you just need to make sure to keep that in mind when you're dealing with your users who are working in this particular module. To manually add an official document to a contract file folder, you'll click on the add on the contract file view, select the section, and add the document by either generating the document or selecting the document from your local file system. And that is right here. That'll bring up this particular screen and module. The PCF edit view will be displayed for you here. You'll be able to select the date of the document, the status, which is keep. You'll basically keep the status not completed up here until you're done with the actual document, you've signed it, and then you can mark it completed. You'll click generate a document if you want to generate a document, or select a document if you want to select a document. And then from here, you can remove the document, view document, or save the document. And then we can go ahead and click on document title to enter the document title. We usually recommend that you keep the document title the same as the file name so that there's no confusion between the file name and the document title as a whole. You can edit the document in the contract file once it's added. The official document can be updated, changed, or deleted prior to clicking the completed button. So you can go through and edit, remove, or view the document. You can pick or click on any of the buttons to take whatever action that is required right on here. The last steps is for you to click on completed button, and then if required, you can send to PCF. If sending to PCF, the user will need to sign the document. Once sent, the document will become read-only. Now, please note that if the official document is not entered into contract file folder correctly, there is no way to remove it from the database. That is the PCF database. The corrected document will need to be added to PCF. So this is the question that comes up a lot. A user will go in, they'll create a document, they'll send it, and then they'll look at it later and, oh man, I added something I wasn't supposed to. Hey, RMS, can you go ahead and delete that document for me? There's no way we can do that. It's a system of record. It's only one way. The only way that you can correct it is by creating a new document, send that document over for the correction, and note that in the new document. And essentially, that's the way that you would correct it. So that's one of the gotchas for this particular screen, is that official document is basically, once it's sent, there's no way for us to delete it from RMS. I think James is here, right? Yeah, James is here. James, do you have anything else to add for the RMS contract file portion for sending the PCF? All right. Nothing to add, so I think we're good. All right, let me pull up, actually, let me go back one, and let me pull up RMS real quick here. All right, let me go into my contract, and inside my contract, we can go over here and click on contract file. Contract file comes up and it'll show your document here. You can go ahead and click add, and then you can choose a particular document to add. Once you've added that particular document, it'll show up as completed here. You can click, if you click on completed, it basically complete the document, but you really want to select the document or generate a document first. So in this case, we'll select the document. And we'll call our document test. Our document is listed here. We can then come here, we can sign the document if we need to sign it. And basically we can select where we want to sign it. So those are our signature positions that we can choose. Sometimes one of the questions is, hey, I want to sign it in a particular spot. Certain documents require you to sign it in a particular spot, so you can select that spot from here depending on which document that you're using. I'll just stick with last page, bottom right. It'll go through and it'll complete and sign the document. It'll make me enter my PIN. So as you can see here, that's where it'll make you enter your PIN. So you enter your PIN there. If you've got your CAC, and then it'll apply your digital signature to the document. And then once the entire document is done, you can view the document, or you can save the document out again. In this case, we're going to go ahead and click completed. And once completed is done, we can now click send to PCF. And then this document will be queued up and ready to send to PCF. And it'll go into the submittal register report cabinet is where that document will end up going. All right. Now, there's also documents associated with daily reports and PCF. So those daily report QCS standards, QC PCF status, which will list right here. So when you're in that daily reports module, you'll see the QC PCF status, and it'll list right here. It'll tell you whether or not it's sent and what the current status is. The PCF document, once again, it'll just go through. This is what I just went over before, but you'll basically either generate the document, select the document, and then you'll move down here to click the summary, add any date information, and then you'll come up here to step number 3. You'll complete it and then send to PCF if needed. Once your document has been completed, then you can come back over to the PCF documents area, and then you can view your status. The status is not signed or reviewed, ready to send to PCF. We can then examine the PCF documents to view and track the overall statuses of each one of these PCF documents. It seems that one thing I want to mention is that it seems like once a year we have an outage that's beyond the scope of RMS. It's not like we can do anything. It's like an event that happens, and it's at a higher level than we can control. And we must push in a bunch of tickets to various teams to troubleshoot the transmission of that data to PCF. However, whenever we get the data resolved and it gets fixed, there's a period of time where we play catch up. So you'll notice that some of your documents are sitting there and they're not being sent during that time. It's because the system is trying to catch up for all of the documents that did not get sent while the PCF data was down. So essentially, that's what we're trying to navigate and go through during that particular time. So just be aware that usually it happens probably once a year. We usually try to work with CEIT and then also the PCF folks to try to get those things situated. I know HQ is always involved because they have to escalate tickets. So you'll notice when it goes on because we will send the notification. So just be aware when that happens. No PCF documents are going anywhere, and we're trying to essentially troubleshoot and correct that error at a higher level. So those are the main areas that we're trying to work through. All right, and that's the end of the PCF section. All right, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask your questions now. Over.
If you put a new document on a closed, like a new document package for PCF on one that's been closed and add a note, can they see in PCF which one is like correct?
No, because it's already been sent. So you wouldn't be able to resend the sent document. Sorry, it's just going to be in RMS at that point, but you wouldn't be able to generate one anyway. So essentially, I see what you're asking. Let me pull it up just so I can illustrate it for you. So on this particular screen, we're just working with the one document here on this particular screen. And then when you're dealing with the document package, however, that allows you to add multiple documents to it. But if you've already sent that document package and it's already been forwarded to PCF, you can add another document. It won't go though. It's not going to notate anything. So it's basically just one transmission. Is James on the line? Because he can probably answer that question as well. Just to make sure that I'm giving you the correct information. You double check and see if James is here.
Yes, this is James. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you, James. Thank you.
Yeah, so you are exactly correct. The program does not keep track of which documents are primary when sending to PCF. It just sends them all. So you'll have to keep track of that on your own. Once they've gone to PCF, they've gone. But all the documents for this should be sent to PCF. Over.
So if you added, like, say a submittal package went and then you added a new one to make a correction, would PCF show both packages?
Yes, PCF should show both packages. That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Both documents.
Right, in two separate packages. That's correct. All right. Any other questions? Over. Okay. All right. We'll continue to push forward. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the import export submodule options, and we're going to try to hit all of these just to make sure that we cover all of our bases here. At this time, touching on the import export submodule, this module includes the operations needed to bring external data into RMS and export selected document packages. This module is designed to make exporting documents from various document packages easier in RMS, and allows certain interfaces to work a little bit more streamlined so that you can get your data entered into RMS with the least effort possible. So if you log into RMS and you open up the desired contract, the first one we're looking at is P2 imports. And the P2 imports is the USA's Project Management Business Process AIS, PMBP. All USA's contracts are linked to P2. This process is automated by a computer batch job, so no action is needed from the user. This module can also be used to view information about a specific contract in P2. One of the screens that you'll notice that pops up is that RMS now includes a server process, which keeps all districts up to date with the latest P2 data. So let me just go ahead and bring that up real quick, just so go ahead and see. So usually when we come in here and we're going over here to import exports, this is where the import export section is, and we'll see all of our items here. We want to click on import P2, and then that's the pop-up that'll display. RMS now includes a server process which keeps all districts up to date with the latest P2 data. There's no need to manually import P2 data or schedule an import time. The process runs continuously and will generally reflect all changes from P2 within an hour of the change. So you should be able to see the reflection of your updated data within the hour. All right, next is the import from another contract module was designed to follow the import of contract data from one contract to another. So if you go ahead and select that particular option, that will present you with a view that allows you to copy a contract from a lookup. You'll select that particular contract that you want to copy data from, your source contract. Select the data that you want to copy by clicking the appropriate checkboxes below in the select data to copy area, and then click on the copy selected data button at the bottom of the screen. Now, a warning pop-up will appear. Click yes to proceed, click no to cancel, and then you can move forward with that. So let's go ahead and jump into that real quick. Hold on a sec. All right, so what I did was I copied the subcontractors over, and essentially I just went over to import export. I selected the copy data from contract. I chose 1660 as my source contract, and I basically just input the last four of the contract ID that I wanted, and I selected that particular contract. And then I came down here and chose subcontractors. I didn't have any subcontractors in my contract that I was working with. It was actually only had one subcontractor. That was the land one that I entered. And essentially I used 1660 as my source, and I copied the selected data in. And after I did that, and I come over here to administration and then subcontractors, it basically lists all the subcontractors that I just copied over. So I have all the subcontractors over from the other spot. You'll notice though that some of them don't have the particular trades copied over. They're basically just the subcontractor codes. And then I would need to go in and enter the trades and the information. All right. The next one is the document package export. And the document package export, actually, no, let me go back. Did you guys hear me when I was talking about import P2? Just want to make sure. All right, the document package export module provides the ability to export documents from various document packages throughout RMS. So this was added because certain districts wanted to be able to export their documents out from within RMS into physical format. Document packages are used throughout RMS to facilitate the inclusion of supporting documents. Document packages are typically created after completion of the data entry of a record. The system will create a new package and add a PDF copy of the form for the contractor to sign and submit to the government. So essentially, you'll just basically create that particular document, click on the boxes to navigate, download the choices, then click Get Documents, and then you can select Download Folder. All right, let me switch back over. So essentially, when the user comes in, they'll come to Import Export. They will then choose Document Package Export. They'll select Include Signed Documents if they want that filter, or uncheck it. If they were just to click on Get Documents and no modules were checked, they will get a warning. It'll tell them they need to select the package, or at least one document. And then you can go through and you can make sure to select it. You can select daily reports. If you select QC daily reports, it'll uncheck all documents and QC daily package. Some of these options do have other options and force other options to be grayed out. If you select QA daily reports only, it won't include all documents in QA daily report packages. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes people will select something and they'll say, hey, how come I can't select all documents? Well, because this actually affected this option. So that's one thing to note. So the same thing here, if you select 4025 government remarks only, it will affect all documents and contractor transmittal document packages as well. So you can just go through and then you can select those you'll notice that selecting this one affects this one up top here as well. So, and then when you find the one that you want, you can go ahead and click Get Documents. You find the location where you want to save it, and it'll download those documents and package them up for you. All right, the next one is import deficiencies. And the import deficiencies area is basically sometimes out in the field, someone may be entering deficiency items into RMS provided using the Excel template to track their deficiencies out in the field. And anytime that has not been performed or completed in accordance with the contract, something out in the field that has not been performed in accordance with the contract, that's considered a deficiency. So they'll enter that into the RMS Excel template. And essentially, once that's entered into that template, we can then bring that and import that into RMS. The pitfall with this module is that the user may have inadvertently edited the template. And if they edited the template and they try to import it, the import is definitely pretty finicky when it comes to that template. So in order to correct it, just download a new template and transfer the data from that old template into the new template without changing the formatting, and everything should be okay. So this module, import QA deficiencies, is used to import large amounts of data, thereby saving a whole lot of time for manual entry. And obviously, since you're using Excel, a lot of people can facilitate data entry in Excel a lot faster than they can into a normal program. And what you'll do is you'll download the import template, take that into the field, fill it out, or you can fill it out on your machine. Make sure contract number, date, location, deficiency description is added to the import template as a whole. Read the template instructions. Do not alter the template. Select QA rep, and then click import deficiency items from the Excel template button. Confirmation message will be displayed and let you know when everything is done. So with that, same exact thing. So we are in the import export area. We'll come over here to import deficiencies. Import deficiencies will give us location, safety violation. We can download the template from here, and that'll give us the template on our side. And then we can fill out the template, and then we can import the deficiencies. Oh, we need to select a rep first. All right, and then we can import a deficiency that we select. And then once we select that, it'll then be brought in. So now, as I mentioned, the usual gotcha with this particular screen, or for that matter, any of the Excel import screens, is that if the actual data itself was manipulated as far as the formatting, then that can stop the import from actually working. All right, the next one is the export of the mods list. So the export mods list allows us to list modules, adds the ability to export a list of all the modifications for the contract. And it basically just will export that list. So you'll click on the export to file button, and then you'll click save as. You'll be able to export to the file or export to a clipboard. You'll select the location where to export, and then you'll save that particular export file. If you export to clipboard, you'll basically be able to cut and paste into a location of your choice, either into Notepad or an Excel or wherever you're wanting to import to. And for RMS, same thing. It's import, export, and then export mods list. And the export mods list is essentially just two buttons. Export to file, it'll bring up. You can save it to a file here. And then export to clipboard. That'll basically export to the clipboard, and then you can paste it wherever you need it to be pasted. All right, the next is the import real property, and the import real property is pretty similar to the import of deficiencies in the sense that it uses an Excel template. The real property input template is used to create a batch input file to feed into RMS. The Excel format allows flexibility in getting the real property data into RMS systems, both from a user familiarity standpoint with Excel and the editing capability available in Excel via cutting, pasting, inserting rows, etc. So RMS import export real property screen has the option of selecting this particular template as well. So we see all the options available on this particular screen. And the actual real property template instructions here on how to populate this template, you can right click on this particular area right here. When you right click on it, it'll actually show the instructions for how to populate the template. So you can go through and read all of the instructions on how to populate that particular template. Now, one of the key caveats for this one is basically the formatting once again, or making sure not to follow the actual X, where the designations of the X's need to be placed, or basically saving it into an invalid format file. The worksheet is set up with only 500 rows. So if this needs to be increased into the data into a second spreadsheet, and then advise your project engineer on your RMS representative to import using the merge option. So that's where the merge option would come in. You would import the first batch and then import the second batch as a merge, and then it would basically bring it in and allow both of those two data files to be concatenated together, and then all of your data will be listed inside of the data grid at that point. All right, from there, that's the import real property. And from there, you can go ahead and download the template, click there to download the template. Once the template is fully downloaded, then you can go through and import the template. You can either overwrite existing real property, so that'll overwrite your real property, and you can merge. So if you have multiples that you're importing in, let's say you have 150, that'll be 3 files that you'll be importing in, and you'll be doing merge for each one of the files. You'll be doing overwrite for the first file, and then merge for the second and the third files when you do your import. You can also do an export real property, so you can export your real property items to Excel, and it will spit out an Excel file so that you can utilize that as well. All right, and then we have import submittals, same exact thing. Import submittals basically uses the Excel file format. You'll click the download template button to download the template. Once the template is ready, select where the template will be uploaded to, and then select either to overwrite existing submittals or merge with existing submittals. You'll click on the import submittal register button to import that particular template, which is right here. Now, the template file follows almost the same convention as the previous templates. Instructions on how to fill it out will be right here. You can basically right click on this button, and then it'll bring up the instructions for filling it out as well. And then you can go through and read through the instructions on how to fill that out. And bringing this back up. Okay, here we go. And import submittals is right here. Do the same thing. Bringing in the Excel template, we can download the template from here. It'll download the template as a zip file. We can unzip that template. And then right here, one of the options that we have is we have multiple registers that we can import it to. So essentially, if we had multiple registers, 01, 02, 03, we can import our register to a different register as well. And then we can overwrite the existing submittals and merge existing submittals. Okay, submittals though is one of the things I want to bring up with submittals is a gotcha, is that if you are on a job that has been going for a while, you'll usually not want to import a submittal. Sometimes people may import submittals when the job is just starting out. and just to get everything going. That's usually the time when we say, okay, you can go ahead and do that. If you're trying to import later on, you'll want to select the merge existing submittals option. If you select overwrite, you'll basically be leaving yourself some orphaned transmittals. So essentially, some people call the support desk and say, hey, I can't find any of my submittal items. I have the transmittals, but they're not linked to anything. And that's usually because they've done an import and they overwrote their submittals. And essentially now all their submittals are gone. And now we have to find that old submittal sheet that they had, re-import those so that we can get the proper linkings again. So it kind of becomes a nightmare. So we usually instruct people that, hey, only import these at the beginning of your job. You know, if you're doing a design build or something like that, you'll do it at the beginning of the job, and then basically just tell the contractor to enter it from that point forward. So if you're working with a user that's having that particular problem and it comes up as a red flag, then you'll know exactly what type of instructions to give that particular user at that point. All right, let me bring this down. The Specs Intact is an automated software program that RMS is allowed to use that helps in preparing standardized facility construction specifications for the UFGS. The Specs Intact file can be used to import information into RMS submittal register. The information can then be bulk loaded into RMS. So the import submittals, that's for Excel, and the Specs Intact is basically the text file that is spit out from the Specs Intact program. With Specs Intact, we have a particular module that allows us to do that import as well. So with that particular module, you'll go in, you'll add a Specs Intact file, you'll load the Specs Intact file, and then you will double click to edit the file, select the file, or delete the file, all from that particular view. Once the file has been added, you'll then see a list of options. You'll be able to choose these particular options. You'll have a click to select the submittal register, default register is 01, import option to merge into existing register or replace existing registers. You'll notice that you'll also have a history of the files as well. So you should be able to maintain that particular history. The submittal items listed will be displayed from the Specs Intact file, will be displayed from this particular option here. Now, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that when you are importing the Specs Intact file, if you're doing a merge, you want to make sure to remove duplicative items in the Specs Intact file. If you're importing the same file again, sometimes users will import and they might see like a double 013300, two sections that are labeled like that, and you don't want to have that. Majority of the time it'll be 0133 and then the actual 14 character code with the decimal places. It'll usually try to find the item and then overwrite that particular item, but if there's been any linking to it, usually you want to make sure that those particular items are not duplicated within your file again. The unintentional replaceal will occur if you replace already existing items that exist before, same as the submittal register import. We want to make sure that we're not importing a file that is going to replace items that have already been linked with transmittals. So it's one of the things you want to keep in mind. As we're going forward, we can go ahead and take a look at the sections area. The submittal sections will be displayed on the section side, and then their titles, corresponding titles. We'll also be able to see the reviewers that are displayed. The reviewers are three character codes that you'll basically be able to see. And then you'll be able to view the Specs Intact file in its raw format, the comma separated file as well. All right, and from there, you'll come to import export. Same thing, import Specs Intact, and from Specs Intact, you'll basically come up here, click add. And unfortunately, the only Specs Intact file I have are all like legal Specs Intact files, so can't import one of those. But the screens did a good job in explaining them. In any case, most of the times when you're importing a Specs Intact file, you'll be just coming here and following the instructions All of the instructions that are given are pretty easy to follow. The only gotcha is to make sure is that overwriting. You only want to overwrite at the beginning of your job, and then after that you want to do merges. And then if you're merging the data, you want to make sure that the data that you're merging is not duplicative data. All right, next up is the network analysis system or standard data exchange format. So the NAS SDEF module was designed to be able to import contractors' scheduled data as well as some financial data into RMS with the use of an SDEF file or standard data exchange format file spelled out. And needs to follow a particular process and a particular order. The SDEF file is a text file that contains information exported from Primavera that is specifically formatted so that the file may be read by RMS. The SDEF file itself is divided into 9 parts, each part being called a record, and the 9 records listed are the volume, the project, the calendar, the holiday, the activity, the precedence, unit cost, progress, and the file end record. So all of those records total up to be the SDEF file. Now, for most of the people, when you say SDEF, they'll immediately think Primavera, and that's pretty much because Primavera is pretty much the only one that's adopting it. But it's available for any network analysis system. So any network analysis system that wants to adopt the standard data exchange format can. However, right now it just seems like Primavera is pretty much the big dog in town. So we pretty much list everything as Primavera. For the NAS system, we'll go ahead and click on the NAS SDEF option, network analysis option. That'll bring us to our SDEF selection view. If NAS SDEF files have already been previously imported into RMS, the list will be displayed. You can click Add to import a new item as well. Each row displays a few columns of the data for quick reference. The data date is indicated on the SDEF itself. Schedule type is manually indicated when uploading the file. Date imported, created automatically when the file is originally imported, and then date invoice imported when the financial data from the SDEF was imported into an invoice. SDEF file is the file name and the approval status. So you'll basically see the accepted for import or not requested. So importing the data, select the add, edit, and delete buttons in the upper left-hand corner of the view to perform its corresponding actions. From the SDEF process, once you click on the user, you'll basically be able to select that particular file and then include that file in the SDEF. The wizard will launch. And as long as you initiate the Windows Open dialog and you locate the SDEF file, once you locate that particular file, you can click on Open and then click Next, and then click on the bottom right-hand corner of the Add View. After you click on that Next button, then the information about the file is going to show up. It's going to be displayed, and then whatever the file type is, the preliminary information, the initial, the impact schedule, rebaseline, monthly update, recovery schedule, or whatever other options that you'll see. So the file type is essentially what I just listed: preliminary, initial, impact schedule, rebaseline, monthly update, recovery. You'll have the selection date. You'll have the file version based on the contract numbering, and then you'll have the project ID, which is carried over. And then you can go ahead and click Finish to go to the next step. So these are the items over here. Then I'll click Finish to go to the next step. Now, a quick note on this area is for existing SDEF files, this view is also accessible by selecting an SDEF file on the selection view and clicking Edit, or simply double-clicking on the file itself. So if a file already exists, then you can go ahead and double-click on that file. Now, the SDEF edit view as a whole lists all the information on the top portion, which will be the generalized information about the SDEF file. As noted before, the project ID, the date, schedule type, but now you can see the activity count, the critical activity count, the version information, total activity cost, and the cost to date. And then down at the bottom in the data grid area, you can see the options for the activities as well. The next area that you'll be able to see is the calendars view. So you'll be able to see all the calendar information that's listed. And then you'll be able to see the raw SDEF file if you click on the last option. The NAS SDEF activity schedule is used to keep track of the actual and scheduled start-finish dates of contract activities and used to process pay requests. Review of contractor schedule will continue to be outside of RMS 3 government mode using contractor schedule software. Activity schedule can be entered manually or by the SDEF import. That's an option that they can choose. The core can switch to a manual schedule for a Gantt schedule or a NAS schedule, whatever is required by the contract. So if importing an SDEF schedule into RMS contractor mode is under import module, you usually have the contractor import this module, and then once the contractor imports it, the contractor will then send it over to the government so that the government can then view that particular module and approve it. All right, and with that, let me bring this demo up. All right, here we go. Let's bring this demo up here. And let's just meet this real quick. All right, so this particular demo here is just going to walk us through importing the NAS SDEF file from the contractor. We'll go ahead and select our particular contract that we want to work with. And once we've selected that particular contract, we'll proceed over to import export and then the NAS SDEF schedule. The NAS SDEF schedule will show and it'll list all of the SDEF files that are previously have been listed. It'll show the approval status that we can double check, and then we can choose to add one. Once we add it, we can find that SDEF file, select it, and then we can add our information, select the preliminary option there, and then that brings in our SDEF file. One of the things that after the SDEF file is brought in, the contractor himself can verify the information that he needs to, but for the contractor, he won't be able to import it as yet. He'll have to request the acceptance to import the schedule. So essentially, he'll go up to the top in the upper right corner and then request acceptance for that particular file. Go ahead and fast forward a little bit. All right, so right now, we're just going through and taking a look at all of the different items that are outlined within the file as a whole, the activities, the calendars, taking a look to make sure each one of the items is as it should be, coming over from our schedule. This is where the contractor can verify it before actually sending the request over to the government. Once that request is done, we can go through and send that request over to the government. The request has now been sent over to the government. And now we can switch over to the government side, and the government will now be able to view those particular SDEF files. The SDEF file that the government is looking at right now will show up at the bottom. You'll see preliminary, and you'll see acceptance required. There can only be one at a time, so you'll only get one acceptance required at a time. You'll come in, and that particular acceptance module that you'll view, you can go in, and then you can preview the data that the contractor sent to you. Once you click on preview, you'll be able to see all of the proposed changes that the contractor is trying to make for this particular data element. So as you go through, if everything looks right to you and you feel that everything is good, then you can go through and accept the schedule for import. So once you choose accept the schedule for import, you'll be prompted with an information pop-up. You'll go ahead and say yes and confirm it. And then once that's been confirmed, then we'll switch back over to the contractor side. The contractor now has the ability to preview the data import for the contractor, and now he has the option to import the actual SDEF data into RMS as a whole. He hits his pop-up, he clicks yes, and now the data has been imported into RMS. All right, and with that, that pretty much concludes that particular demo. for the RMS file. So one thing to keep in note is that for NAS activity schedule, it is critical that the actual start dates and actual finish date in the NAS schedule are the same dates added to actual activity start and finish dates entered in QC daily reports. If the dates aren't the same, RMS won't import those particular dates. And let me just go ahead and bring that particular option back up just so we can see. All right, so that's usually referring to over here when we're in contract setup, and then when we go over here to submittals and schedules. If we check this box here, requires the contractor to use actual start and finish dates from the QC reports on the NAS, then basically those dates will have to match. So if this is checked, then essentially that red lettering there will apply. So sometimes when the contractor is trying to import something or the government's trying to import something and things are not working, that's usually one of the gotchas that are listed. So just be aware of that if that comes up. All right, and that's the end of that section. Let's go ahead and unmute all and see if we have any questions available.
Yeah, hi, from the New York District. I had two questions. One, are you going to review the schedule comparison report? And two, you mentioned when the government goes to import the contractor's SDEF file, I noticed there was some red errors. Should those be resolved before we import the contractor's SDF file into the government side of the module? Over.
Copy that. Yeah, so those weren't red errors. Those were basically showing you what were going to be changed. So essentially, if you were not going to agree to those changes, then you could cancel those particular changes. As far as the schedule comparison report, that was not on my list to go over, but I can definitely add it, and then we can take a look at it. It looks like we'll probably have some extra time, so we might be able to go over that as well.
Yeah, if we could, I'd appreciate that. The last time I used that, it looked like there was some inaccurate information printing out on the report. So I was wondering, and I did send a RFI to the RMS help desk. I don't know if they've corrected that or not. Over.
All right, copy that, Paul. I'll go ahead and note you down here.
Hey, Gerald,
Follow up with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you're speeding through the topics quite a bit. So I mean, I don't know where you are up in terms of finishing. You're on slide 95. I'll look and see in a minute. But what we can do, if you get finished, if we can gather some topics and use some more time tomorrow. I don't know if they want to stay here 4 hours or, if we've got some flexibility. You're doing well.
Right. Yeah. Well, from what I heard from Carrie, she told us 3 hours was fine, but she added the 4 hours just in case, just so we weren't rushing. But
yeah, we had no idea of how many people were going to attend and what the question activity was going to be. So it was a swag. I just want to make sure that, the people who are asking questions here get what they need. What about QC entered in the dailies? You mean go over that report, Melissa? She might be typing. I'll take notes and we'll go back through and make sure we keep questions answered, even if that means we have to follow up tomorrow, if that's okay.
All right, copy that. Yeah, I'm thinking for this question, the schedule comparison report, I might have to stage the data so that I can take a look, just so I make sure to have everything properly aligned so that we can test the data. So it should be okay. I was expecting a lot more questions, but we're breezing through. We're not having as many questions as I thought we would have. So that's why
people are so smart.
All right, so we'll go ahead and switch over to the next section. Let's go back over here. All right, so we're basically on the setting up a new contract section right now. So we're going to take a look at how to set up a new contract. A lot of people usually have questions regarding setting up a new contract, add information, what information is added, when is it done, by whom it's done. So we'll try to address some of those within this particular topic here. After selecting district, make sure you have the display contracts button selected. Note, if you have display contracts or display projects selected, only the edit button will be available. So that's referring to the option down here. You have display contracts or display projects, referring to the P2 projects. So make sure that you're in the correct view, or when I say they, I mean the users that are asking you the questions. Make sure that they're displaying contracts and not displaying projects. If in displaying projects, you won't have the add or edit or archive buttons. You can go through and enter the title for the new contract and change the office to the office that will be administering the contract as a whole. Once the information is entered, you can select OK. After clicking OK, the contract menu screen will be displayed. So on top here, when you click Add, you'll get the title for the contract. You'll be able to enter the title for the contract, and then you can select the office that you want to add that particular contract to, and then you can choose copy data from another contract if applicable. The next step is to click on the contract description button, and on the contract description button, you will then get to the contract view. And on the contract view, you have several different areas. We have the fiscal year, which is the fiscal year you're entering for the contract, the contractor short name, and then we have the contract number. Now, the contract number and the delivery order number are pretty important. The contract number is broken up into several different parts. And usually sometimes you'll hear the contract number being referred to as the DoDAAC, which is the Department of Defense Activity Address Code. And that's separated into three different areas. The first area is kind of like the enterprise identifier. The second area is the procurement instrument code, or actually 4 areas: enterprise identifier, the year, and then the procurement instrument code, and then the serialized identifier, and then the last portion of it is the delivery order number. Now, it's very important that when we set these up, if we're downloading from CFMS, your contract number has to match exactly what's in CFMS. So this is a big gotcha when setting up new contracts. And the main gotcha happens over here. Usually they get the number right, but the delivery order number, if it says N/A, then it has to be N/A. If it says NA, then it has to be NA. So you got to make sure that this is exactly how it's entered within CFMS to make sure that the actual download will occur. Once that's done, you can go through and enter the contract long title from the inside that field as well. And then still on the contract description screen, following the fields needed to be entered: the contract description, primary fund type, the contracting method, the contract location and customer. Option fields are wage determination number and wage determination date for those fields as well. And the next step is to go and click the contract setup. First, we'll click the back button once you're all done entering the data here. And then we'll go to contract setup, and then we'll start to enter the contract setup default information. On the administration funding tab, it is recommended to keep the default boxes that appear, so you can select the CFMS database name that contract is funded by. So sometimes when you're entering a contract, it might be funded by different CFMS. You might be coming from a different CFMS account. So this is where that you would change that, but you'd want to make sure that everything matches. So if you know where it's coming from, that's where you would change it over here. The default entries may be changed based on the office policy as well. So that's one other thing that you want to be aware of. Once you're all done with that section, you can go through and you can determine the contract setup options at that point. The CFMS database name, as I said before, is what you would go through and do. Checking use CFMS for downloading finances. That's what you would check if you're downloading CFMS. Will this contractor be linked? Will this contract be linked to P2? If yes, go ahead and keep that box checked. Use P2 data prior to award. RMS can use P2 data for pre-award milestones, so you can go through and keep that one checked if that's what you're going to use. Use only one phase. For the most part, you would have that one unchecked unless you need to check. If you check this box, RMS will treat a multi-phase P2 project as one phase. Most of the contracts I see pretty much all use multiple phases. I think James is still here. He can jump in and let me know if that's the case. Do you know if there's a majority of people that are using single phase or multi-phase, James? Over.
And most of the time it will be single phase. However, there are many cases of more than one. In fact, there can be quite a few different phases. So it just totally depends upon how you want to orient your contract. But yeah, the vast majority will be just single phase. The phases actually correspond to the WBS bands in P2. So if you're in P2 and you look at it, the work breakdown structures, each one of those will create a separate phase in RMS unless you have that use only one phase checked.
Right. Now, do you find that most people go in and actually check use only one phase, even when they have multiple phases? Over.
Most do not. I think they leave it so that it is not checked. I think that is the default for contracts, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. That is the default. Okay, copy that. Thanks, James. So pretty much for the default, you would leave this unchecked. But as James mentioned, most of the phases it comes in will pretty much only be one. There's only a limited few that have multiple phases. But usually I never see this. I never see this checked a lot. It's pretty much only checked for like 1 or 2 jobs that I've seen over the past 5 or 6 years. Allow government to enter contract data. That's not recommended. So important to try to have the contractor enter that data. So we want to make sure that the contractor is responsible for entering their data. Track insurance, track payrolls, track labor, requires a DD 1354. These fields are used just for custom reporting. So do not alter except possibly the category codes for. Change CAT codes to match the using service, i.e. Army, Navy, etc. If your CAT code does not show in the drop-down menu, you need to check the Enable FY22 lookups for DD 1354 and that box, which is going to be available for all contracts. Send docs to PCF. There is an option to not upload to PCF, and that's used in very rare cases. So consult your district POC. In this case, some of you are the district admin, some of you are the district POC, and in this case, if it's identified that you will not be using it, then obviously you will already know that. RMS 2.38 has been sunset, so this particular option will be going away in the future release. So you don't really have to worry about this one too much. QCS is turned off, and RMS access is currently set to no one at this point. You can also determine how funding is tracked. The default funding method is track funding at funding account level, pre-plan obligations for payments on all CLINs. So with this one, this is the normal RMS setup for RMS funding. This option gives you the most control, but it requires the most data entry of all the options, but you maintain each funding account with that particular option. Next option is track funding at a project level. And that particular option computes obligation amounts for payments based on available funds. RMS will treat separate funding as one and will prorate payments based on the amounts of funds available. And then the last option is track funding at project level, manually enter obligation amounts for payment. Users are required to enter obligation amounts manually for each payment. So quick note, do not use project level funding unless it's actually required. So for this one, I'm not sure why most people would choose it, what the actual case would be. Bosley, would you know why most people would actually choose that over?
Usually that can be chosen when you have multiple types of funds where the funding organization is wanting you to use a certain to use funds in a certain order.
All right, copy that. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those are the listings for those 3 options that are available in that drop down when you're determining how to track funding. Should you decide to change the default funding method by clicking yes, another pop-up window will appear requesting you enter your username and password. However, once funding has been set and payments processed, we recommend you do not alter payment methodology. It could result in data loss. If you opt to changing funding methods, you'll see this warning screen, and basically you'll be presented with that particular information that you'll need to confirm. Bosley or James, what are the risks if they were to change their funding midstream? Over.
So if I could answer, if you change the funding, it can reset how RMS calculates the obligations for the payments. That's the main thing that will be lost. So RMS keeps track of what payments have been made against what obligations and CFMs, and it tries to keep them balanced so that you don't run out of funds by the end of the contract. And if you change that funding, you could lose some of those settings that you have. There are other things that are set up in the funding accounts and things that are done a little differently, so you could lose some of that settings as well. It gets a little bit complex, but it is definitely not recommended once a contract has been started and you have been doing payments for you to go ahead and change this. That's why if you click the yes on this, it's also going to ask you to type in your PIN for your CAC card to verify that you were the one that changed it and perhaps you were the one that broke this contract, etc.
Copy that. So basically, only change that if you have to change it, but our recommendation is not to change it. All right, next we'll select the Payment Modifications tab, and then we'll enter the ACO modifications. That's the Administrative Contracting Officer modifications information, and the Contracting Officer modification information. We'll check the progress payments, allow additional earnings not included in activity earnings checkbox to allow the contractor to bill for stored materials and performance and payment bond. This only needs to be checked if the contractor is not going to be using a pay activity for these items. So we'll check include all activities on prompt payment document button to see all activities for the contract on every invoice regardless of what is billed. So a quick note here, if obligations for payment will be populated once CFM's finances have been downloaded. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Those obligations for payments will be populated once the CFM's finances have been downloaded. Once the payment modification tab is completed, we go ahead and select the quality assurance tab, and then we enter the following fields: the project engineer, on-site COR, number of QA shifts, the chief QA rep shift 1, time extensions due unusually severe weather. One note to keep in mind is that QA report type only needs to be changed if it is different from the default. Alternate QA shift 1 only needs to be populated if there is a designated alternate QA. So, okay, what I see most of the times is someone will come in and they'll put their name here, and then they'll put their name again over here. You don't need to do that. You only need to put an alternate if you have an alternate. So you don't need to put your name twice. You can let the users know they don't need to put their name twice. They can just put their name once. They don't have to put it over there again. And then next, go to the Submittal Schedule tab and enter the review periods for the appropriate type of submittal types. and the default number of copies that the contract is required to submit. When we are entering the default government reviewer, this will populate the submit register automatically with the individual's name and will default the transmittals to their office address. So check that the address transmittal 4025 packages 2 is set to the office address that should appear on the ENG 4025. So when we're going through and we're selecting this, we just need to make sure that these are the proper information that we're selecting to. Now, when we're looking at the dropdown, there are several different options up here. When selecting the defaults, we see 30 days. That's the default for government review period. So we have government approval, we have for information only, and then we have government conformance review and design, and then we have the designer of record approval, and then we have DACR, which combines the designer of record approval and conformance, and then we have DAGA, which combines designer of record approval and government approval. One of the things that most people ask is, hey, there's another drop down on the screen. Why doesn't it show up here? Sustainable notebook doesn't need a default, so there's no default for sustainable notebook. It's just a final option, and most people don't really choose it, but it's only chosen in special cases. But there's no default for that. Number of copies, same thing. It's 6, which is default there for the government approvals, and all government approvals have 6, and then for information only is 5. But you can go through and select those if you need to. If your district has a different policy regarding the number of copies or regarding a review periods, such as instead of government review being 30 days, it's 45 days, you'd come in here and you change your 30 days to the 45 days, and then it would basically apply to all of the items within that contract. If the SDF is being used, click the requires the contractor to use actual start and finish dates from the QC reports on the NAS to ensure that the activity start and finish dates match in the dailies to the schedule. So this is the option that I was showing you before. Usually when the user is importing their SDF into the system, for some reason it might not come in, and that might be in reference to this being checked, whereas the actual start finish dates from QC reports on the NAS are not matching. So you want to make sure that those are matching exactly. So that's one of the gotchas, is that there can be delays in syncing the payments and coordinating the submittals to the connecting activities if the imported NAS doesn't match. So those are the general steps to setting up the contract, adding a contract description, complete information from contract setup menu, administrative funding, payment modifications, quality assurance, submittals, dredging if required. All right, let me go ahead and bring up RMS. All right, we have RMS up here. So let's go ahead and create a new contract. And you'll notice right now for adding an RMS contract, we actually have some new items which are listed here. We have, is this a NATO unclassified contract, or does this contract contain CUI? So essentially you'll have to apply those designations right when you're creating the contract. For this contract, I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to enter my title. All right, and the contract is added. And so when the contract is added, now I'm in the contract, it has my information here, but now no other information is added. So I need to come in here and start to add my information. So fiscal year, I'll add the fiscal year in here, short title. And then my contract number. We'll go ahead and add it in here. And then delivery order, I'll leave it NA. And then right here, we go through and then we start to select all of our options here. If we need to add any additional information, that's where we will add them in here. Architect engineer for the design build. If we're doing a design build, if it's BIM compliant, we'll add that here. Once we're done in this, we'll then jump over to contract setup and then perform the remaining steps. In contract setup, as I mentioned, we'll start in administrative funding, and then that's where the NATO CUI is listed as well. And then we come through here, use CFM for downloading. Yes, you want to do that. We're going to select the default for us. We're not going to do anything with CFMs right now, though. Will this contract be linked to P2? Yes, so it's checked. Use P2 data prior to award. Yes. Only use one phase. I said before, that's the default is unchecked, so no one will really not check it. Allow government to enter contract data. We'll go ahead and leave this unchecked as well, which is a default. Track contractors insurance, track contractors payrolls, same thing there. We can go through and select whichever option is applicable to us here. We can go through and enter our day information here, track payrolls, category codes for Army, Navy, United States Air Force, and then right here, enable FY22 lookup for DD 1354. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this option allows you to be able to switch the lookups for the DD 1354 if this is checked or unchecked. And then this is the option for the funding. The default is track funding at the funding account level. So that's usually what we'll have there. And then obviously the currency, what currency that you are working with. Then we can switch over to payment modifications. We can go through, list our payment modifications here. If we're downloading from CFMs, then we'll get these when we do our downloads. We can go through and allow which checkboxes we want to have checked. We can set up our issued by, our administrative information. Our quality assurance, same thing, come through and select our defaults that we need. These will basically be up to your particular district codes or your particular district business processes. If we're dealing with multiple shifts, we can add those in here, and then we can add our different shifts in here as well. The default is one shift. For a border wall, we can go through and list the border wall that we're working with. And then expected delays, expected work week, 5 days per week, and then anticipated adverse weather when we're anticipating those. Submittal schedule, we can add our extra registers here. We have one default register, which is our main register. Submittals, we can go through and compute submittal need dates based on activity schedule. So this is going to be based on the activity schedule. We are importing early and late start finish dates from the contractor's network analysis system. But if we don't want to do that, we can do manually enter schedule start dates, start and finish dates there as well. That option goes away at the bottom. If we have this option set up for requiring NAS, we can check requires the contractor to use actual start finish dates from the QC reports on the NAS. And that will bind this particular contract to ensure that the NAS dates match the actual start finish dates on the contract. And then we can select our weather modifications. So we can select these specifications. I don't have any currently right now. And then we clear that. And then if we're doing dredging, we come over here and do dredging as well, if that's an option. All right, and that walks us through the whole setup phase there. So we'll go ahead and open it up for any other questions. All right, and it's unmuted, so if you have any questions, we can go ahead and answer those questions now. Over. All right, no questions. Okay. All right, perfect. We'll go on to the next module. All right, the next module that we're going to be talking about is the RMS P2 interface. And the RMS P2 interface that we currently have set up, after logging into RMS and selecting the desired contract, we can select the administration tab and then the P2 projects module that will be listed. Now, the P2 access from the administration module will allow us to be able to track all of the P2 projects from that particular screen. The administration module is where all administrative functions are located. So when we open up that particular module, we'll be able to set up the contract. And there's a specific order that we might want to go into when we are doing this particular setup. We want to go and set up our contract setup for new contract actions first, and then set up prime contractor and contractor's administrator, set up the contract description, and then the contract number, set up the weather delay, weather days, submittals, select manual or NAS schedule, and then we can go ahead and jump into P2 projects and what can be linked to RMS contracts. So it's usually recommended that the PAs, the project admins, linked RMS contracts to P2 numbers and set up contract obligation amounts for each funding account under contract funding tab, and set up the award contract amount under project funding tab, and set up the primary funding type under contract description module. Once that's done, then we can proceed to assign the PDT members to the specific contract, the RFIs, and then the contract file. This is where all the official documentation will be stored. And then lastly, contract status should be kept updated throughout construction phase until final payment. So that's the overall approach that we recommend taking for that list. But the overall module that we're discussing is the P2 projects module, which this module links all the P2 projects to RMS contracts already. So if we click on the add button and select the correct P2 code and task code to link to the RMS contract, then those items will be linked. Now, it's important note to keep in mind is that it's preferred that for the PA to link the appropriate P2 code and task code after uploading CFM's finances to RMS 3.0. So the PA goes to the contract funding tab, and then for each funding account, selects the appropriate P2 code and then adds the contract amounts. The task status, milestone events, and cost time growth data will come from P2 to RMS 3 prior to construction. So that's something to keep in mind as well. After the construction award, this data in RMS will feed P2. So those are two different things to keep in mind. That, all right, just had a reminder there, just for when to take a break. All right, so the task status, milestone events, and cost time growth, as I mentioned before, keep in mind that prior to construction award, these are coming from P2, and after construction award, this data in RMS will feed P2. The common errors is that P2 project is not displayed in the lookup field. So we want to check to ensure that the project was set up correctly in P2. We do have a tutorial video for that, and we can point you over to that route as well. But one of the things we want to keep in mind is that the contract setup needs to be taken into account, whereas the Office P2 needs to also be taken into account. That's the Office P2 org. And then the dollar amount needs to be greater than 0.01. So no 1 cent. 1 cent is a designation to ignore. And then the status of the project needs to be open or active. So let me actually pull RMS up real quick here. All right, so we're going in, as mentioned before, in contract setup. We want to make sure that will this contract be linked to P2 is checked, and use P2 data prior to award is also checked. All right, the next area we want to take a look at is the contract status screen. This also has an effect on P2 as well, so we want to make sure to bring that out. The phase status issues that'll pop up here. The project engineer should update contract status monthly until final payment. The data uploads to P2 is linked for upward reporting. So we'll click on the contract status data field and then select the status code that reflects the current phase. or status of the contract until final payment. We'll select the primary delay code in option number 2 for this contract, update this each month, and then we'll select and enter the remarks in the short field. This is usually set aside for the PM. And then number 4 is enter the remarks for customer to see under issues and customers. And that's usually the remarks will be in the P2 reports area, is where those will be displayed, where the customers can view them. And then the last section, which is the issues USACE, update prior to monthly PRB, and then enter the date in issues remarks as of when update takes place. The milestone schedule and monthly placement can be found on the schedule tab, which we'll actually take a look at that a little bit later. So one of the next details associated with this is making sure that this screen gets included and gets brought up to date as well. Let me switch over. And the same thing applies. We'll be going to contract information. It's right above contract setup into contract status. And then inside contract status, we have the phase status info. So no, the default, it'll show you the status photo. Some people don't realize that there's the phases over here. So sometimes when they come in, they'll still be looking for where to click on it. It's actually just a tab right there. They'll click on it, and then they can go through and set the information that needs to be set right there for the status codes. And then they'll set the primary delay codes right there. And then they'll go through, and like I said, the PM will enter the remarks here. You can go through and enter the dates, and then the issues customer can be entered here, and then the issues USACE entered in this heading as well. All right, one of the next sections regarding P2 as well is looking at the interface schedules, and that's found in the local office. So we'll click on the local office, and essentially we'll select interfaces. And when we select those interfaces, we'll be able to see the interface schedule. And the interface schedules that are listed are one for import finance from CFMS and the other one for import projects from P2 as well. So we can go through and take a look at that real quick. So if we're coming over here, we'll go to local office, and then the local office will go to interface schedules, which is this one right down here. Once we come in here, we'll see the import times are based on system availability, and then we'll see our CFMS import times that are designated, and then our P2 projects from import projects from P2 import time, which is also designated there as well. And that's underneath the local office and interface schedules, and that's where you find it. And then you want to go ahead and defer to your local policy, so whatever your local policy is set to. And then the last portion is the import P2 module area, and this one's pretty easy because it's done for you. It's pretty automatic. So RMS now includes a server process which keeps all districts up to date. As mentioned previously, when we take a look at the import export module, I just want to make sure to bring this up again so that everyone can be aware of this here. And that's on the last portion when we're taking a look at the import P2. That should be done automatically when we go in. Import P2, we'll have this pop up that tells us, hey, it's already done automatically for us. All right, and that brings us to our next segment, closed. So we can go through, and let me unmute everyone and see if we have any questions available. Check the chat.
I have a few follow-on questions, and Boz, you kind of started trying to answer my questions on like I've heard people refer to the auto link, and I just want to make sure I understand like what that is in relation to P2 and how it connects to projects. I guess before I continue, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I think
Okay.
James is on, so James can probably address that one. James,
Okay.
are you still over?
Yes, I certainly am. Thank you for the good question. So this is a very important function because this will reduce your workload. The key thing is to make sure that the full contract number with delivery order is in the WBS band name of P2. So if when we import the P2 projects, it sees the contract WBS band, RMS will grab a hold of it and automatically link it up to the contract with that contract number. You also need to make sure that that project, that P2 project, has the correct task order. We also call it the CFMS org code. So the task or task organization, that's what it was called. So the task organization is usually associated with each office. So if you pull this in, you want to make sure and associate it with the office. If none of your offices, the task organization for that P2 project, it will not be automatically linked. So you need to make sure and have not only the contract number inside of that WBS band name, but also the task organization needs to be there. And of course, you need to have the RMS codes, the RMS underline A underline contract, RMS M underline milestone codes. The status of the project needs to be open. The dollar amount, you need to have more than 1 cent. If it's 1 cent or less, it will be ignored by RMS. So the task resource amount needs to have a value, some dollar amount. And so those things need to be set. Once that is set, they should be brought in automatically. If you're finding something is not being brought in, put in a trouble ticket. We can research it and find out why that P2 project is not being linked up to your contract.
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
help?
So yeah, and just to kind of summarize, so specifically, when I put the P2 org code in and tie it to that office that I'm tying the contract to, that is, am I understanding that that's the first step in making sure that it's going to look the right place in the link, is that in the office itself, I first need to make sure that P2 org code is right. And then when I create the contract, now it already knows the P2 org code, or CFMS org code, if you want to call it that, because it's kind of both. When I create that contract, I'm assigning it to an office, so it already knows here's the P2 org code that is connected to that. And then, again, provided, like you said, that my P2 is set up right, like my PM has got the contract number and the work breakdown structure, and I put the contract number into contract description. I guess the point that I've understood that auto link happens is the first time you do a CFMS download. Do I have that order right?
Yes, the P2 project linking will be triggered by a CFMS download, but we also have a nightly batch process that should download the P2 projects into RMS. And that's
Oh,
been
okay.
pretty reliable, that part of it.
So even if I didn't and I don't know why you would do this, but say even if I didn't actually force a manual CFMS download at that point, when the P2 sync happens, I should be able to go back in my contract and see if that auto link popped up.
Yes,
Okay.
and it will occur usually nightly with the batch process.
Awesome, thank you. Good info.
All right, thanks, James. I also put up on the screen here so that you can see the P2 org code within the office as well. So that's where you set the P2 org code there.
I have a question on that one. In a lot
Yes.
of P2 districts, yeah, and a lot of P2s, they put the district's organization code up top instead of the individual offices. Will that link?
James, I'll let you answer that one.
Could you state your question again, please?
Sure. So in a lot of the WBSs, the district will use the district's org code and not the individual offices' org codes. So if we have it at the district levels, P2 organization code, is it going to link if it's in a sub office with a different organization code?
Yes, that's a good point. That task organization needs to be in some office somewhere. So what I would do in that case is to put that task org code in the district office itself. But yes, if it is in at least one of the offices, then P2 download should pick up that P2 project with the org code and that P project and link it up to the contract, whose contract number is in that WBS band. That's correct.
All right. So just to be clear, so as long as the district office has that task code, it would float to any sub offices then and link any contracts.
It should, yes.
Okay.
And if it does not, let me know.
Alrighty, I will. And then, and the other thing I was going to say is we did a test last week on some stuff, and it took 2 days for the data to come from P2. So it may not be in 24 hours. It took 48 for one.
Yeah, that is correct. So downloading from P2, they have quite a few years ago, this has been over 10 years ago, P2 system has slowed down. And so they asked us to start downloading from P2 from a staging database that they populate every night. So if you think about it this way, they will populate it and then we will grab it, but we grab it once a day. They populate it once a day. So it can take up to 2 days for that data to reach us. That's correct.
I have another follow-on question about the prior using P2 data prior to award contract setup option. Does that, checking that on and off, I know that affects the actual data that P2 and RMS are syncing, at what point that starts. Does that also affect the auto link in any way?
No, that does not affect the auto link at all. So it should automatically link up even if you have use one phase or that kind of thing. The only thing it wouldn't do, of course, is link if it says, if you have unchecked, I should say, the use P2. So if you're not going to use P2, then it will not automatically link up.
Okay, so then if because at our district, we actually don't link that until award. So if I have that, you know, I can't remember if it's checked or unchecked, but basically if I have that setting so that it's not syncing to P2 until award, if I put the award date in, is that the point where the auto link would happen, or is it just doesn't happen at all at that point? And that might be why I've never seen a contract auto link if that's the case.
That is correct, because if you have that unchecked, use P2. Now, use P2 prior to award, yeah, it may not link up at all. So we can probably look into that with you and get a solution for you that would work. But yeah, you want to make sure that use P2 is checked. And yeah, you know, that is a really good question. I'm not totally sure whether the auto link will ever occur if you have it unchecked to use P2 data prior to award, because that's when usually people will link up those projects.
Sounds like sounds like a good RMS support ticket to throw it and ask, because yeah, we've been wondering why nothing auto links, but we do only connect once award happens. So if that option turns off my auto link, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And I actually wrote the source code for that P2 download stuff. And that's been quite a few years ago. So I would have to dive into that again to answer that specifically. So yeah, if you put in a trouble ticket, we can research that and give a precise answer for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any contract that has been marked do not use P2 prior to award RMS ignores looking for that contract in P2.
All right, copy that. Okay, we also have a video available as well, linking P2 projects that'll walk you through the actual process of linking P2 as well, goes over all the information. So if you want more in depth, I put the link in the chat, the YouTube videos in the chat, and it'll walk through each one of the screens that you have to go through, the actual office information, linking it there, and then making sure that the items here are properly linked and properly selected. And then that's the other one with the phase, and then going to P2 projects and making sure your items there are entered correctly. And then we also talk about what James referred to as the RMS codes need to be associated with the correct project, like the RMSA codes. And the project needs to be open and active and not closed. And then actually just enlarge that. And then the dollar amount resources assigned to the project needs to be greater than 0.01 cent. 1 cent is a designation to ignore, from what I understood from before. The task organization needs to be assigned so it can find it, and that's usually associated with an office. And I'm assuming that part is usually done inside of P2. So those are all the items there, and it covers that all that information there. So I put that video in the chat as well. So if you guys need to get a hold of that video, you can take a look at it in the chat. Thanks, James, for covering that information. That was really helpful. Thanks, Bosley. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I wasn't expecting to get through 123 slides in 2 hours and what are we at? 2 hours and 30 minutes. I actually thought it was going to take a lot longer because I was anticipating questions. So now we're actually heading into the creating custom reports. So Bonita, are you still here? Okay. All right.
I think she had to take a phone call, so she's on the phone with somebody else right now.
Okay. All right. Copy that. No problem. What I will do is I had that on my list to cover tomorrow because I had that as a pretty long topic.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and call it a day and cover that tomorrow? Because there might be people who had to leave and are planning on being here tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. Dallas, are you okay with that? Over. Okay, Carrie, are you here?
I am. I apologize. I'm having to find the right buttons to click. No, that is fine. And then of course you've added to your list of things the thing about the schedule that you were going to probably have to create data for to go over that tomorrow. So as long as you think you have enough time already scheduled for tomorrow and that, then I think you can probably call it a day. I'd probably just go around the horn one more time and see if anybody had any questions about anything that was presented today before we end it, though.
All right, yeah, copy that. Well, just like Carrie said, let's go around the table again. Does anyone have any questions? I think you guys are all still unmuted, so feel free to jump in and ask any questions. Over.
I have one more question. On the auto linking of the P2s, does that work with multiple P2 numbers linking, or is it only for one?
I believe it works with multiple. James, can you correct me if I'm wrong?
It does for multiple.
Okay, thank you.
All right, copy that. Okay, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up and call it a day today. Tomorrow, we're starting hot and heavy on the creating custom reports and queries within RMS. So we'll try to hit that and make sure to cover that with the new Telerik reporting options that we have available. So that should be probably last us a good portion. So we'll see, unless we blow through it quickly like today. So we'll see how it works. All right, well, I'd like to thank everyone for attending day one of the session, and hopefully we'll see each and every one of you tomorrow at day two. Thank you.